My name is Clarence Baker. I was born on the island of Grenada in the Eastern Caribbean. For those who may not know the geography of the Caribbean, Grenada is situated between the twin island of Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela, which is on the mainland of South America. I traveled to the United Kingdom in 1965 at the age of 11 to join my parents, making me a member of the Windrush generation. For we were among the first generation of Caribbean children to have entered the UK education system en masse. And as one would imagine, we did not face an easy introduction into the school system. We are faced with blatant racism, name calling, and everyday abuse. But most devastating and often demoralizing to many was the attitude of the teachers. For we are faced with educationers beholden to a racist ideology, where the teachers assumed wrongly that they would be confronted with illiterate Black children coming from the colonies. The indigenous white parents, on the other hand, were not happy that the children had to sit side by side in classrooms with Black children. And the children will display attitudes which were just a reflection of what their parents were thinking and saying at home and on the streets. Of course, what I did not know or choose to understand was that many of the new arrivals from the Caribbean was coming from a much higher educational background, had already passed the 11 plus back home in the Caribbean, and in many instances were far superior educationally to the English children in the classrooms. This, of course, would be a cultural shock, one which could not be accepted, and as such, teachers played a major part in suppressing rather than uplifting the educational advancement of the vast majority of Caribbean children at the time. Making matters worse for many West Indians, as we were called, many parents, although confronted by racism themselves in the workplace and everyday living, whether because of gratitude or fear for the children, seem to have placed so much confidence in the system that they failed the children by not acknowledging what they were passing through, resulting in many bright young people, especially boys, who were most feared, regressing rather than progressing. I make reference to this point simply because as Caribbean people, we seem not to be interested in documenting our own history, resulting in others writing and telling our stories on our behalf. And as such, when it is written, it is almost always a reflection of others people's opinion or expression about us, with little or no first-hand experience of our realities. As a Pan-Africanist, one would probably acknowledge my African heritage. So many do blatantly deny the African heritage, refusing to see or acknowledge themselves as Africans, or at least African descendants. I see it as important that as writers, it is important that we take responsibilities for documenting our history, and by extension, putting right all that have been wrongly documented about us. For a people who do not know themselves and are unwilling to identify with others who look like them, coming from the same continent like them, are condemned to division driven by confusion. I say that knowing that Africa itself are not united, a legacy of division which continues to be the plague of that great continent, which shall never heal to the benefit of all its people until and unless the division instituted by the colonialists are erased and structures put in place to enhance and promote the concept of unity based on self-development, calling on its people not only on the continent, but through the diaspora, including those whose ancestors were stolen away from the continent, now still struggling for acceptance in the Americas, Europe, and beyond, who may one day come to see the continent of Africa as the future for all Africans. Just as China may know the works for the advancement of China, no matter where he is. The Indian works for the advancement of India because he knows and recognizes himself as an Indian. The Jews work for the advancement of Israel and united in the belief that nothing will shake them. There is a reason why Africa, the richest continent on earth, houses the poorest people, whilst others grease their hands, playing on our confusion, greed, and division to exploit that which will never have been theirs in the first place. A word of warning: there's a new form of colonialism knocking at the door. Be aware of those who come bearing gifts. Better the beast we know than the one who, through trickery and the lack of foresight on behalf of some leaders, may condemn future generations to a life of bondage greater than before because of accumulated debts, through which the continent of Africa would once again find itself in bondage. I was inspired to write the book Still in Chains, which is republished under the title Still in Chains, the new edited version. Because born in the Caribbean of African descent, I felt it necessary to highlight the true history and ongoing struggle of the English-speaking Caribbean. For as children of Africa who inherited these beautiful islands because of the sins of the Europeans who stole us away from Africa, our struggle for identity and to build a progressive future is the same as it is on the continent of Africa. The decision to write the book stemmed from my experience growing up in the United Kingdom, realizing that as Africans from the continent or the diaspora, we tend not to document our history, but are more likely to be reading that which others have written about us. The vast majority of our leaders, thinking themselves well educated, being able to boast of having attended some of the best schools around the world, and nothing than educated fools. For they seem not to be willing or able to decipher that which they had learned and to use it for the best interest of the people or our people. And as such, because of greed, corruption, and the senseless need to enrich themselves at the expense of the people which they were elected to represent, they end up working for the benefit of others. Hence the saying, they release the chains, but now they use us with brains. My book, Still in Chains, is based on the historical evolution of the mostly English-speaking Caribbean. From the coming of Columbus, the annihilation of the Caribs, who originally inhabited the islands, leading to the most inhumane form of human trafficking ever known to mankind, the importation and introduction of African slaves to the region, the struggle for emancipation, concept of the Federation of the West Indies and its demise, leading to self-government and independence of the individual islands and the way forward. The book focuses on Grenada, being the only English-speaking island to have had a full-scale revolution, the demise of the revolution, and subsequent American invasion. It also looks at Cuba's support for the revolution and the region as a whole, Cuba's support for the freedom movements inside Africa, their intervention in Angola, which led to the defeat of the South African army, which at the time was the third strongest army in the world in Angola, Namibia, which led to the compromise, which led to the release of Nelson Mandela and the ending of the apartheid regime in South Africa. That is a story that is not told to us. And many do not know that it was because of Cuba exploits inside Southern Africa why the compromise was reached and Nelson Mandela was freed from prison. As Black writers, we are all aware of the difficulties we encounter in gaining exposure for our work. In closing, I would just like to say that you can purchase the book, this book, Still in Chains, by myself. You can purchase it from Amazon, Asa House, Barnes & Noble, and other online outlets. Using the link, and please, if you have pen and paper, please take this link, www.steelinchains.uk/. That is one word, www.steelinchains.uk/. You can also order signed copies directly from me by using the inquiry section on the same link to contact me direct. I would also greatly appreciate your feedback on my presentation today by using the inquiry section on the web page. Again, www.steelinchains.uk. My brothers, my sisters, it is imperative that we as writers focus on documenting our history. We cannot depend on our history being written for us by others. I'll give an example. In Grenada, after the Americans invaded the island, the Americans went back and they documented every man that was lost and every piece of hardware that were lost. To this day, the Grenadian government, repeating Grenadian government, have made no attempt to document how many Grenadian soldiers were lost in the battle, their names or what happened to them. Disgraceful. Because no matter what the political affiliation, a soldier's responsibility is to defend his country from internal and external aggression. And the soldiers who were lost in Grenada to the American invasion were defending the island from a mighty superpower. And to think that they will be left to be forgotten, while the governments in Grenada have put up monuments to the American soldiers who were the attackers. This is the situation that we live in at this time. As I said before, many boast the best education, have gone to the highest, to the biggest universities around the world, but they do not know how to use that education to benefit their people. At the moment, most of our nations are becoming dependent on outside of foreign aid. Very few are investing in the ability of their own young people. Remembering, of course, that in the Caribbean, especially, many of my generation had no inheritance to think about. For our parents were all coming from the fringes of the plantation where their parents were slaves. Now, of course, we can probably boast a little inheritance to help our children develop. When the best lands, the best beaches, and all those things are sold off to foreigners once again, our children have no opportunity to develop anymore. My brothers, my sisters, this is my presentation. I hope very much you read my book. It is deliberately written, packed with information, but written so it can be an easy read. So thank you very much. Please contact me on my webpage, www.steelingchains.uk/. Thank you.